Mic check 1 2. Hello, hello. Welcome. This is Just Human, episode 375. And this episode's been a long time in the making because I just been away from the microphone. Um, this is going to be the podcast, of course, for the videos that I do. And okay, bear with me. I haven't done this in a while. This is the podcast where I'm just like a little bit more just human, and I'm just going to riff for a little while here at the beginning, and then I'm going to move on to some court cases. So, court cases we're going to talk about here in this episode are going to be the what's going on with Fauci and Dr. David Morens. That's kind of like the feature of this episode, where I go over all of the mentions of Fauci in the Dr. David Morens indictment, and just riff about the whole situation with Fauci and NIH and Morens and Dajak and all of these other guys and everything that was going on with EcoHealth and how it factors into the indictment. Not everything broadly. I'm not really trying to get at things that aren't in the documents. I'm going for things that are in the documents, which we've gotten new D classes recently from Gabbard and Rand Paul and all these things. And I reference a few of those in it, but it's not meant to be a dig into those things. I'm following the court case because that's where we're looking for accountability, and that's how I'm following our justice system. And Dr. David Morens is in big trouble. He's looking set to spend the rest of his life in prison. I don't know that he'll take a plea deal. It's possible. But I'm thinking not, because it's very much in his interest and in his friend's interest, colleagues' interest, to try and prop up the narrative that they espoused for so long, right? And then we also talk, or I give an update on what's going on in the J5 pipe bomber case against Brian J. Cole. There's been some interesting developments in that. And I'm not sure what else I'm going to throw in. There's some stuff going on with the SPLC case that I haven't made a video about, but I haven't decided. I've decided to make the video, but I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to attach that video to this podcast. And depends on how long I ramble on here at the beginning of this. So I wanted to ramble on a bit here at the beginning and be just human with you guys. Because after all, that is who I am and what I am. So I've been away from the microphone this summer a bit, and some of it has been family time. We haven't gone on any big vacations or anything, but we've had a good time just enjoying summer together with our dogs in our backyard. We've been working on our house quite a bit. My wife has had more workload this summer than she has in previous summers with her job. And so that's been a thing. And then music lessons for the boys. My son, my oldest son, is playing guitar just like I do. And I got to tell you, I know other parents are going to relate to this. When your kids pick up hobbies or interests that you had at their age, it has been surreal for me to wake up and hear guitar playing and just go about my day hearing guitar playing that my son is doing in his room on my guitar, on some of my guitars, pretty frequently lately. And he's playing all the songs that I used to play at that age. He's playing all the Metallica and the Pantera and Led Zeppelin and Nirvana and all this stuff I used to play when I was his age. And he's learning them so quickly because he has so many more resources than I did. And then to also hear him play music that I never learned to play, more modern music, some of the bands that we both like, and just catch these riffs that he's learning. And it's just been absolutely surreal because it's I'm sure many of you who are parents can relate to that experience and how it just puts a smile on your face, and it puts you in a nostalgic, reflective mood, and it also puts you in a place of gratitude, right? So I've very much been in a place of gratitude in regards to that, and I've been in a place of gratitude that a band or a couple bands that my son and I are both massive fans of came nearby, and we got to go see them in concert together. So we got to go to some metal shows together and headbang together and experience that. So it was beautiful, and that's been my favorite thing this summer. Um, and I told my son that, and he said the same. He said that was his favorite thing he's done so far this summer. Um, so all this good stuff's been going on, and at the same time, I've been fighting my own depression and just living with my own struggles, my own mental struggles, and um, for whatever reason, I have not, and it's probably not one reason; it's a bunch of reasons. It has been very difficult for me to engage with the podcast and making videos and being active in social media and doing the just human thing. It's been it's just been really challenging for me, and it's all internal. It's all in my head. I mean, there's physical symptoms, but it's just been a challenge for me, and I just want to. I'm sharing all that because I think, as I've experienced so often through doing this podcast, there's folks in my audience who relate to that, um, and and also because I feel like I owe an explanation at times, um, for some things, and maybe I shouldn't feel that way, but some folks in my audience have, you kind of endeared yourself to me, um, and I really appreciate your feedback, your comments, and of course your support. And so I just feel like I owe you a little bit of that, of an explanation. Um, Maybe I don't, but that's just I'm just being honest about it. So recently, last week, I started trying again, and I recorded almost 2 hours of material, and I planned all sorts of stuff out. I had this presentation. I have it right over here, my bookmarks. I had a presentation. I was going to talk about the DNI and Gabbard leaving, and then I had this whole presentation planned out on Trump's plane and the controversy with its itinerary being leaked and the Turkey trip, and then I had this big Iran war thing that I was going to go over, and I recorded myself going through all of this and spelling out the situation with Iran right now and what we've been going through. And I think I had some good points in it. And now the content of what I presented, I liked, and I still like it, but I didn't like my recording. I didn't like how I sounded. I really struggled I just didn't have my flow. I just didn't have my flow. And I'm not really saying I have my flow back for what's in the rest of this episode, but I have it back more than I had a week ago in doing this presentation. So ultimately, I decided not to release that video. Um, Maybe I should have, maybe I should have released it, but I don't think so. Um, or at least I'm not happy. I'm just not happy with what I created, and that's okay. It's a bummer, but it's okay. And I thought, now as I'm preparing this episode, I would just kind of riff just a little bit, or just offer some of my thoughts on some things that are going on with the Trump admin this summer and over the past many months. And from somewhat of a place of frustration and disappointment, at the same time, still still thinking this admin is incredibly good and is doing a lot of great work, but they're not flawless. They're not flawless. And I don't expect them to be flawless, but there's been some big blunders. So specifically, I want to speak about the Iran situation as it stands today, with Iran last night, as I'm recording this, violating the ceasefire slash memorandum of understanding, violating it for a third time. And I'm sure it won't be the last. Unless the actual people in Iran who are our adversaries are eliminated and or their means to carry out attacks are eliminated, they will continue to do what they do. They've done it for almost 50 years and they're not going to stop. They're not going to, this tiger is not going to change its stripes. It's not going to happen. And it's not, it's in the, this is actually not, it's not crazy of them what they're doing. It's strategic, because the higher the oil prices are on the global market, the more it benefits their partner, Russia, who needs to sell that oil to China, to others, and they need that price to be high in order to fund Russia's war in Ukraine. So it's in Iran's interest for oil prices to be high. It's also in Iran's interest to damage American support for the war in Iran or the war in the Middle East. And they know that the back and forth, the up and down of the conflict is wearing on the American people. At the same time, all of the various influence ops that have been going on for years are focusing on pulling the president away and undermining support for the president dealing with Iran right now. And the American people's opinion of the war and support for it is waning. It's decreasing and decreasing and decreasing with each back and forth. Iran knows this, and they're utilizing that. They're intentionally degrading American support through the back and forth, through the we'll make a deal, we won't make a deal, we're blocking the strait, we're not we're opening it, we're taxing or charging a fee for the ships that go through. We're bringing in the Houthis to attack shipping on the other side of Saudi Arabia, up going into the Suez Canal. So it's all strategic. The other thing is that they know that the midterms are coming up, and that if they can get Trump's approval rating low enough, they can impact the midterms and possibly cause Trump to lose both houses, or at least one of them. And if they can do that, then the president will not be able to continue or escalate this conflict. He'll continue to lose support. It's no secret at all that Democrats are planning another impeachment of Trump. You can bet on a third impeachment of Trump is planned, and how far it gets is going to depend on how many Democrats get elected in the midterms, and also how many Republicans can go soft, such as Massey, which he'll be gone, but boy, they sure do wish Massey would be in, because he would the way things are going, he would definitely vote to impeach Trump. There's a turncoat. So they're planning on it, and they're planning on running on the third impeachment of Trump. Now, they won't succeed with impeaching Trump. They won't have the votes to impeach him, but they're doing it to raise money, which Dems need a lot of money. They're very much in a deficit. So Iran is keenly aware of all of the politics internally here in America, and they are exploiting them to their benefit. So all those factors are happening and will continue to play out. I don't think that this is going to resolve in the very near future. Now, it could resolve if Trump hits them the way he has threatened to hit them and the way he needs to threaten them, but there are complications with that. And in the other video I recorded, I went into a bunch of details about this, but I kind of want to stay away from going into details about it, and instead hit you with a couple observations that I have on the whole conflict generally. Or maybe I shouldn't say generally, but in my opinion, as far as I can tell, that's how I should set it up. My understanding, and as far as I can tell, is that this administration missed their best opportunity to topple the regime in Iran. The best opportunity was back in December and January of this past December and January. That was the moment when when the protest kicked off in Iran and tens of thousands of people turned out to protest the regime there, that was the moment that the US needed to apply maximum pressure. That was the moment the US needed to overtly and covertly support the counter to the regime within Iran. And we couldn't do it. We either didn't, couldn't do it. I think it's a combination of both. I think we decided against doing it because they were already involved in Venezuela at that moment. And because we had so many assets out of theater. We had some assets in theater, of course, in the Middle East, but we had a lot of assets out of theater, and we didn't have what was needed to carry out the kind of operations that needed to happen in order for us to kinetically support the uprising in Iran, to support the protesters. And because we couldn't kinetically support them, tens of thousands of protesters died. The estimates are between 10 and 40,000 civilians killed by the IRGC. And I remember Trump posting on True Social, "We support you. Now is the moment." It wasn't enough. And I wonder if that was a really bad move of Trump egging it on at that moment. I don't think that was, I think he should not have done that unless we actually could have supported, because we supported them, but we supported them months later, like 6 weeks later, after we were finished with Venezuela, after we had moved assets around, assets had time to move to the Middle East. Then we were able to support, and then the Iran war began, this current one. And I fully support it, but it should have begun earlier, and it should have gone further. It ran from, what was it, like March 1st or February 28th through first week of May, something like that. And then all of a sudden, the US says, all right, we're done with the kinetic side of it. We're done with the military strikes. Now we're doing sanctions, and we're inviting Iran to the negotiation table for a ceasefire. And then we had a few weeks in the late May, early June of talking about a ceasefire. And I think that the president wanted a ceasefire, which became a memorandum of understanding. I think the president wanted that in order for oil prices to go down for summer travel season and to take the Iran conflict out of the news headlines at least a little bit during America's 250th celebration and 4th of July weekend and all of those things. And also because that's who Trump is. He has a very long history of suddenly offering an olive branch to someone. There's an expression I've heard said a lot about Trump, and I repeated it, which is, you should take the first deal Trump offers you, because the next deals are going to get worse and worse for you. That's not always true, but I think it's pretty often true. It's true enough that it bears considering, that observation of Trump. So I think Trump offered he offered a lush olive branch to Iran, billions of dollars. And remember, the regime another blunder of the regime, another blunder of the Trump admin. I guess I've read too many leftist media outlets lately. I'm calling it the Trump regime. Or maybe it's woke right influence. I don't know. So they tried to say the MOU wasn't what we knew it was. They tried to say the MOU, this admin tried to say the memorandum of understanding that was signed in Versailles by Trump, if it was never signed by others, wasn't what we knew it was, which was the JCPOA plus plus plus. And it's just unbelievable that the Trump admin would offer a new improved version of the JCPOA to the regime after we've sunk their entire Navy, we've eliminated their entire Air Force, and decimated their leadership, just bomb their nuclear facilities, almost all of them anyway. And then we're going to offer them this just unbelievably good deal for them, an unbelievably bad deal for us and everyone else. But the Trump admin did it. And Trump signed it. Now, everybody knew it was going to fail. It's not like Trump suddenly decided, actually, the JCPOA was good, and it was so good, I'm going to make my a new one that's even better. Like there's this is the best JCPOA ever. Like there's nothing, never been anything like it. It's not like Trump suddenly decided he's no longer an Iran hawk. He's been an Iran hawk since the 80s. Yeah, since the 80s. So, and he's been consistently an Iran hawk, just as much as Lindsey Graham or anybody else. Rest in peace, Lindsey Graham. So, why would he do it? I think it's just so that I think it's exactly what I said, for the oil prices to go down a bit for the summer, take it out of the headlines just a little bit, and then also to demonstrate that Iran is a bad faith negotiator. He knew they would violate it. I don't think that needed to be demonstrated. I think it took pressure a little bit off of Congress, because Congress had that vote coming up where they were going to vote on the War Powers Act and all these things. And it's just rumors. It's not confirmed at all. But there were rumors at the time, and there still are, that the U.S. has expended a significant portion of our missile stockpiles. And we needed time to rearm. We needed time to resupply our military units. We needed time to cycle maybe some of our units. I haven't been paying attention to who's cycling in and out, but maybe that needed to happen. But I've noticed that after the MOU was signed, suddenly the Defense Department has made all these different deals with Anduril and other groups and Ukraine for licensing of drones and for supply of missile systems. And then Hegseth went before Congress and asked and received many billions of dollars to fund the Defense Department. I don't like calling it the Department of War. Sorry. I know that's the official name, but I don't care for it. Whatever. Maybe it'll grow on me. So I just think that perhaps there's some truth to those rumors that we went through a whole bunch of munitions and we're getting a little bit low. Now, it's my understanding from looking at or reading and listening to people who are far more of an expert, which means they're any kind of an expert comparative to me, in U.S. stockpiles and how much ammo we need of what type and whatnot at any given moment. And my understanding is that we have some thresholds. The U.S. has some thresholds that they try to maintain when it comes to each type of munition. Every type of ammo we have, there's a threshold that the U.S. always wants to have on hand in case Russia invades Poland, or China invades Taiwan, or North Korea attacks South Korea. There's a certain level, depending on what scenario is playing out in the world, that the U.S. has a stockpile of this type. You need this many. We need them in this location. They need to have these dates on them. They can't be however old. Like all these types of things. It's all well planned out. And I don't think we dipped below those thresholds, but we were approaching those thresholds. And we're living in a time right now, and events of the recent days make this very clear. We're living in a time where the world is at war without calling it a world war. I don't really think there will ever be a world war. At least it's extremely difficult to imagine there being a world war again that is anything like World War I and World War II. I think the those days are probably past, and I just have a difficult time seeing something like that play out again. However, that doesn't mean that world wars won't happen. And I think we're in one right now, or we're approaching one, but it's something that you can't really discern until, or trace back until after the fact. And one of the reason this has come to my mind is it was on my mind, and I kind of mentioned it in my video, but after I decided not to publish that video, like a few days later, Ukraine sinks an Iranian freighter in the Caspian Sea. And if you don't know, the Caspian Sea links Iran and Russia, and they run ships in the Caspian Sea back and forth, trading munitions, drones, parts, all sorts of things. And in fact, hold on just a moment. Let me go back. I'm not going to go into my whole presentation here, but I want to show you. So out of this, I was looking at Pickaxe Mountain here. But that's where I have it bookmarked too, but I don't need to show you this. By the way to deal with Pickaxe Mountain, I made a post the other day about how Pickaxe Mountain, you can see looks like that's from I wonder if that's from the earlier strikes. I don't know. All right, so no, there's a road going to it. So that's a vent shaft for Pickaxe Mountain, maybe. All right, anyway. I want this because I want to show you that, forgetting how to use Google Earth. All right, so here's Russia up here. Here's Caspian. Here's Iran. You can see Tehran's very close to the Caspian. So they send ships back and forth, and Ukraine sunk one. And if you don't know, but you probably do know because you're watching me, Russia is supported in its war on Ukraine by drones and drone parts from Iran. So Iran is involved in the Ukraine war directly. Some would say it's indirectly, but it's pretty dang directly. Drones built in Iran, designed in Iran, programmed in Iran, sold by Iran to Russia are killing Ukrainian soldiers and civilians. Drone parts designed, manufactured, and sold in Iran and by Iran to Russia are killing Ukrainian soldiers and civilians. Over here, soldiers raised, trained, equipped in North Korea are lent, rented, whatever, to Russia for Russia to deploy to Ukraine to kill Ukrainian soldiers and civilians. That's an axis. That's and then also China selling equipment to Iran is another link into this, and then China and Russia's relationship. So you have mostly it's Iran and North Korea, but indirectly China contributing to Russia's war against Ukraine. On the other side with Ukraine, you have NATO, including United States, selling equipment, training soldiers, delivering intelligence, signals intelligence, coordinates, strike info, et cetera, to Ukraine for their killing of Russian soldiers. And I'm sure some Russian civilians are caught up in that, but Ukraine doesn't target Russian civilians like Russia targets Russia indiscriminately kills Ukrainian citizens. They call it human safari, and they're quite, well, evil's the word for it. Ukraine, on the other hand, yeah, they've killed some Russian civilians, um, but they are civilians who are aiding in the combat, such as their version of Amazon, which is a participant in their drone proliferation and other things. So we have many countries on either side of this one conflict here. And now one of the primary supporters of Ukraine, the US, is at war with Iran, who is one of the primary partners. Let's say that one of Ukraine's primary partners in the defense of their country against Russia, US, is now at war with Iran, who is a primary partner with Russia, who is at war with Ukraine. We are so close to just calling this World War III. Personally, I would call it World War IV because I think World War III was really the Cold War. That's World War III, but that's debated. It'll probably never be. We're never going to call it World War III. We might eventually refer to it as that or conceive of it as that, but a few more countries get involved here, and this is World War III. Now, I don't mean World War III like there's going to be nuclear bombs being dropped. There's going to be intercontinental ballistic missiles flying back and forth between Russia and the US, and we're all going to be hiding under our desk. I'm not saying that. But I don't think war, but like I said earlier, I don't think wars are fought that way anymore. I don't think wars end up playing out that way anymore. Instead, we have all these proxy battles. Instead, we have the Houthis in Saudi Arabia fighting each other, and the Houthis attacking shipping that is flagged in countries that are friendly with Israel. We have, I've completely left Israel out of everything I just said. Israel is supportive of Ukraine against Russia and supportive of the US against Iran. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Oman are supportive of the US and Israel's conflict against Iran. There's so many countries factoring in here. I've left out mentioning Turkey, Belarus. This is a very complex situation that could escalate very quickly. In Ukraine, striking and sinking an Iranian freighter that is delivering or receiving goods from Russia is the kind of thing, one, I totally understand why they did it. I think I'm not opposed to it. I'm not opposed to it. I'm also not opposed to the US intercepting the S-400 systems or the man-pads that China has recently sold Iran. I'm not opposed to the US intercepting that shipment if it ever goes into international territory. And I'm not opposed to us intercepting it and doing what needs to be done. I'm also not opposed if it's a Chinese airplane or ship that delivers it to Iran. I'm not opposed to us attacking that, even if it does piss China off. It's the right thing to do. But those are the kind of things that can have these knock-on effects that escalate the conflict into involving more and more and more countries and more forces. And pretty soon, this war is global. And you have, and it's so close right now. I mean, we have a conflict here, and conflict here, and conflict here that's just starting. So anyway, these are the kind of things that this administration is having to very carefully navigate, and the kind of things that NATO is having to very carefully navigate. And it's all happening at the same time that there's another situation that has kind of fallen outside the headlines, but was very big at the beginning of the war. And that was discussions of Putin and whether or not he could stay in power, whether or not he had some sort of health issue. They were calling him a madman and all of this stuff. And a lot of it I didn't buy into at that time. A lot of it I still don't buy into either. I think some of it is just disinformation meant to undermine support in Russia for the war. And yeah, I just don't buy it. However, what I do buy is that Putin is aging, that he probably does have some sort of health issue going on. There's just been way too many things that indicate that. For me to rule it out as a possibility and as a factor here. And then Putin is losing so many forces. The most recent estimates are that, and this is from Ukraine intelligence and the CIA, is that the average Russian soldier that they're putting on the ground, once that soldier is spotted in the conflict zone, they have about 20 to 30 minutes to live before Ukraine kills them. I was reading I read a transcript, a partial transcript for an interview with General Petraeus, and he described how there is a kill zone all along the border of Ukraine along the front lines, and it extends 30 kilometers or so, both directions of the front line, and nothing lives there. Nobody who goes in that zone survives. And there was another stat about how there are more deaths than injuries. You're more likely to be killed than injured, and that's like the first time that's happened in a modern conflict. Ukraine has become extremely good at killing these Russian conscripts and others, and their conscripts. And so there's a story going around that Russia is gonna mobilize its actual defense forces. And so that's going to be if that happens, that's another major escalation. And with Ukraine attacking every day, shipping, shadow fleets, refineries, oil pipelines, their version of Amazon, Wildberries is what it's called, which are all these shipping distribution centers. The war is changing right now. The war is changing, and the things are against Russia. Now, Putin could elect at this moment to walk away from this. He could elect that at any moment. But his history is he's going to choose to escalate. And I think Ukraine, in a way, is going to force him to escalate. I don't think they mean to, but I think it's like by consequence of what's going on in Crimea, which is Ukraine has completely cut off Crimea from Russia. The bridges, the rail lines, the shipping lanes, Crimea, and this is according to a lot of Russian bloggers and other open source intelligence sources, Crimea is out of fuel. There's no gas at the gas stations in Crimea. Things are going in the direction of Ukraine not just being able to push back Russia's invasion of their country. It's looking like they might be able to even reclaim what they've lost, including Crimea. If things continue the way they're going and Russia does not mobilize and yet the war continues, Ukraine could seize Crimea simply by means of cutting off Russia's ability to hold it. Or they're out of gas. And Ukraine's drone screen is so effective, they can't deliver troops, resources, nothing. Russia is in such bad shape that they've pulled back their air defense systems all the way to Moscow to guard Moscow, and Ukraine is even able to defeat those systems anyway. It's wild, man, and it's dangerous, and it's good that Ukraine is winning, although winning feels like the wrong word. But the tide is turning in Ukraine's favor. Ukraine is turning in their favor, and the recent meeting between Trump, Zelensky, and Netanyahu went very well. But this occurs to me. I want you to think about this. Like 10 days ago, Trump met with NATO. And then he meets with Netanyahu and Zelensky. Should World War III break out, the makeup of the allies would be NATO plus Zelensky and Netanyahu, plus the leaders in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman. These are very, very interesting times. I'm not predicting World War III. I'm just telling you that we are in a situation that, should it continue to escalate, right now, this summer, is the moment that historians might one day look back on and say, it was Ukraine attacking the ship in the Caspian that was the Franz Ferdinand moment. Or it was the U.S. licensing Patriot missiles to Ukraine that was the Franz Ferdinand moment. Or it was Ukraine seizing control of Crimea, essentially. Or it was the Houthis attacking international shipping again. They got Saudi Arabia involved in this conflict and saw Saudi Arabia and the UAE start carrying out sorties on Iran. That was the Franz Ferdinand moment. Or it was China selling MANPADS, which are shoulder-fired anti-air missiles, to Iran, and the U.S. intercepting that shipment and setting it ablaze, or bombing it on the airfield in Iran, or shooting it out of the sky as soon as it crossed into Iran airspace, even though it was a Chinese-flagged carrier, aircraft, cargo plane. It was the Franz Ferdinand moment. You don't really know what that moment is until you are past it. But that's where we are. That's where we are. And Trump is saying, hey, he said it yesterday, I'm going to either said knock the shit out of them, or I'm going to bomb the shit out of them. He says he said another expression about how he's going to hit them harder than they ever been hit, which we've heard him say many times before. And he just did, 13 or 14 straight days of bombings. Maybe he says he's going to. It better not be empty. I think this administration has really been playing catch up is the wrong word, but they've been trying to recover the situation here since the Iran protest. Here's an observation I talked about in that never to be released segment I recorded. I think this is something that's lost on us as just regular people trying to follow the news and keep up with what's going on in the world as we live our lives. News media presents what presidents do as if they thought of it at that moment. Like the president just will do this and shoot from the hip, just make it up as we go along. And they love to portray Trump as someone who just makes things up as they go along. That's not true. Trump takes input from a ton of different people and then decides. He is an executive, so he makes decisions. Unlike other presidents we have that dilly-dally and pacify and try and pass the buck, and he's not the usual politician. He is still a politician. He's become a politician. But he's still not a typical politician, of course. So Trump still has that executive bone where he makes decisions and gets things done, um, like an executive at a business at a big company would. And as part of that, and the media does a disservice to the American people and to this administration and to our country by extension by not describing what goes on in this administration in the way that is a little bit more accurate. The president is presented with options for dealing with problems, whether the problem is Iran and nuclear facilities, or Iran and ballistic missiles, or it's Ukraine, or it's Russia, whatever it is. The president is presented with options for how to deal with that problem. He may select one of those options, make no changes to it, say, that sounds good, do that right there. Or he may say, I like that option, do everything that you told me you were going to do except for this piece or that piece. Or I like both of these options here, can we combine them? Or I don't like any of those options, I'm going to come back to me with something better. The president can do, and we all know that this is how it works, but the way the media portrays things obfuscates or just kind of leaves that out, and it kind of leads you to conclude, especially with events like that are rapidly evolving, like the Iran conflict, leads you to conclude that the president's just making it up as he goes along and he's a wild card. They did the same with Bush, and the Bush was a cowboy shooting from the hip diplomacy, and none of that was true. I think, okay? I think Trump was presented with options for how to handle Iran during the protest phase. And none of those options were attractive or pragmatic. So, for example, the president might have been presented with options for, hey, these are the resources we have in region. These are the resources we could bring into that region, that area of operation. These are the resources we could bring. We could deploy this group. We could move these bombers. We could move these troops. We could do these things. Here's the likelihood of success. Here's the risk. Here's what would happen if they succeeded in part. Here's what would happen if they succeeded in full. Here's what we think would happen if they failed. I think he was presented with a range of options for supporting the protests in Iran, and they weren't attractive. And I don't think that's his fault. I don't think it's the planner's fault. Remember, the people who come up with these options for the president, when it comes to things like this, like dealing with conflict, it's going to be multiple departments. It's going to be teams of teams of teams. There's going to be generals and colonels and military advisors and think tanks, and there's going to be years and years of research that have gone into this. The CIA is going to have input, the DIA, the NSA, the DOD. Like it's going to, and then they're going to be input from our partners, NATO members, the people in regions such as Israel, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia, and UAE, and Bahrain, and there's so much that goes into it. And there's so many people who are extremely good at what they do and knowledgeable and capable. And they've been working on plans for how to resolve the issue for years and years and years. And before them, others worked on it for years and years and years. And their options that they present the president are the culmination of all of that work that tens, if not 1,000+ people have done over the years to try and figure out, how do we resolve this issue when it gets to this point, or it is characterized by these features, or the problem takes on these contours. And I think the options during the protest phase, we just didn't have a good option. And so he chose not to go with those. He chose instead to go with probably covert operations, whatever we could do covertly, that had high chance of success. He chose to support the protest in whatever way we could covertly, while making statements that he supported them publicly. And then we had to prepare for the options that would have a high chance of success rate. but that we couldn't do until the end of February, early March, which is what happened. And when he was presented with the kinetic options, and we had to bring in Israel, and we did these joint strikes with Israel on Iran's navy, air force, air defenses, manufacturing, their leadership. Massive, massive success. Massive success. You know how the invasion of Iraq in 2003 is studied to this day for how good it was. Actually, Desert Storm is studied, and Iraq 2003 is studied for how the U.S. conducted their operations initially at the beginning of the war, and the massive success we had in dismantling Saddam's military, seizing and taking control of Baghdad, right? Of course, in Desert Storm, we stopped, but it was a huge success, and it's still studied to this day. Same thing in 2003. And the surge with Petraeus is studied, like all of those things. I think what's gone on with Iran is Midnight Hammer 1, the nuclear strikes in June of 2025, and then this recent operations. I think they're going to be studied for decades into the future for just how well executed they do, because this massive demonstration of these combined arms and this new generation of warfare that utilized all these drones and F-35s and all these extremely sophisticated systems. I think the president had options for those things, and those options, those plans, predicted that the Iranian regime would have fallen by now. And it hasn't. I don't know that, but I think that the options presented to Trump and that he chose had some blurb in them about how we expect there's X percentage chance that the regime will not survive into May or into June or July, and yet here they are. I don't know that for certain, but if that's not true, then that would mean that the president thought he would be able to negotiate with this regime, and I don't believe he ever thought he would be. I mean, all wars have negotiated endings, but Trump has always known you can't negotiate with terrorists. However, he was successful with negotiating with the Taliban. They agreed not to kill any more American troops, and sure enough, they didn't. Maybe he thought he could repeat that in Iran. I don't know. But now we're at the point where Iran knows the longer they keep this game going, the longer this conflict drags on, the more it damages Trump politically. And they have turned down a renewal of the JCPOA plus hundreds of billions of dollars. Wasn't like a $300 billion investment fund and all this stuff, and being able to sell their oil to whoever they want, the sanctions relief, all these things. They've given that up, that olive branch. They've turned away from that in favor of continued conflict, because they know that it damages the president. They know that if they allowed the president to resolve this, even though so many of us would be like, this deal sucks, why are we giving all this money to Iran? Politically, it would be advantageous for Trump to do it. So, quite the pickle. Quite the pickle. And some of the resources I've used for, arriving at these opinions of mine about this, my observations here, have been like William Spaniel, the Lines on Maps YouTube account, which is really good, and Ryan Macbeth. I believe it is Ryan Macbeth. Um, really good videos. Um, and a few others. Perun, Perun, very good YouTube channel. Um, and then reading a bunch of news reports and analysis and whatnot. I hope this past like hour of me riffing hasn't come across as me black pilling, because I don't mean that at all. I don't mean to sound like I'm black pilling at all. I could see how somebody could interpret it that way. But I hope my tone changes that. I'm not black pilling. We're we can the US can handle this Iran issue. And we have more NATO partners because of the Houthis joining. We have NATO partners who are now pledging to join us in dealing with this in the conflict. And Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, these other countries in the Middle East, a lot of them have been very helpful. Um, but this is a strategically interesting situation that the president is has to very carefully navigate. I mean, of course, but I hope now that I've brought in all this other stuff, you realize just how true that is. It's not as simple as it's over, and it's not as simple as, oh, let's just glass the country. It's not as simple as that. Um, and I think I think this so much of this boils down to us missing the best moment for these operations to happen. And I don't think that's not to say that Venezuela was the wrong thing. I just think if this administration had it to do over again, they would have positioned more forces in the Middle East before capturing Maduro. But and I don't know this either, but I do wonder if the president in our operation in Venezuela, we knew that it was going to harm Iran, of course, but I wonder if doing that at that moment harmed Iran and the regime's control in the country more so than we realized. And I don't know what kicked off the protest exactly in Iran at that moment and made them so big then. Uh, but dang, it sure would have been great if that started in February instead of December. Oh well. So those are just some. That's essentially most of what I included in my other video, and maybe my other video I did a lot of citations and showed a bunch of stuff, uh, but whatever. I don't need to show it. I'll just go with me riffing. Okay. Hope you guys are doing well. This is Just Human 375. And if you're new here, welcome. That is the segment where I just talk a bunch of stuff. Next we're going to get to court docs. In the description of this video and in my profile page, wherever you're listening or watching this, you can find my link tree. And there you can find all the places where you can follow me, where you can watch my videos, where you can listen to my podcast, and all the different ways to support. I really appreciate the support, especially everybody who's buying me coffee, keeping me caffeinated, and my number one group of supporters on justhuman.substack.com. Thank you guys so much for your subscriptions. That is what keeps me going with this. That is what makes this possible. So thank you. I can't thank you guys enough. And I am looking forward to completing the next issue of the Just Cases newsletter, which is the newsletter where I track the criminal cases that I follow. And yeah, just thank you. I hope you're having a great summer, and thank you for contributing to my great summer. So, all right, I'm going to move on to court cases now. And first up, let's talk. I'm going to do the shorter video. I'm going to do the shorter segment first. First up, let's talk about the J5 pipe bomber. All right, it's time for an update in United States v. Cole, the case of the January 5th pipe bomber, or J5 pipe bomber. sometimes called the J6 pipe bomber by people who haven't followed this case. But if you follow this case closely, either through my playlist videos or threads on X, if you've looked at these documents like we've been doing ever since this case dropped, you've learned that this is really, it's more accurate to call him the J5 pipe bomber. He intended to be the J5 pipe bomber. That's when he planned for the bombs. That's on a whim, kind of, after getting upset. That's J5 is when he made the bombs, and J5 is when he planted the bombs, and J5 is when he intended the bombs to go off. Now, previous to that, he had accumulated the materials to make those bombs over the course of a year or so. And I think, in my non-expert opinion, I think that speaks to this guy, really, having some sort of fascination in constructing explosive devices. I'm not sure he was a violent person. The testimony from people who know him and his history, which he has no criminal history, indicates that he's not a violent person. But for whatever reason, whether it was influences he was exposed to online, it's certainly some sort of faulty worldview, and some fault in his morality, at least at that time, he decided to construct these devices. Now, we've been following these cases, and the reason I bring all that up and recount all that is because to try and reinforce, I guess, how important this case is to the story of January 6th. Because, as I've said in other videos, the J5 pipe bomber being misunderstood as the J6 pipe bomber, which makes sense because J6 is when the devices were found, and the consequences of them being found played into what the other events on J6. It has become a source of contention and a basis for formulating all sorts of conspiracy theories, both on the left and the right. And through this case, through the investigation and his arrest and the filings in this case, we're learning that neither side understood what was going on with those devices. And the fact that they were discovered on January 6th, as phenomenal, as extraordinary as it may be, and he didn't intend them to have anything to do with January 6th. And unfortunately, they're forever tied to those events. Now, the other reason I bring it up is that the last place we left off here was there were a few things pending. One, the second indictment came out, or no, a second superseding indictment came out, and they gave him additional charges. And then there is an appeal going on where he's appealing him being held without bond, him having to stay in jail pending the outcome of his trial. And then there's a motion for something else. A motion to dismiss because of Trump's January 6th pardons. That's the other reason I was bringing all that back history up. So his attorneys, and I think this is one of the most interesting things going on. And if, again, it factors into the story of J6, Trump pardoned all of these people for crimes that they were convicted of or charged with related to January 6, 2021. And I think it's a pardon that was, I can understand why it would happen, but I also think it was not the right thing to do, or at least was not done in the right way. I think it should have only been for nonviolent offenders. And I'm still, all this time later, I'm still shocked that it applied to everybody. I've heard arguments, and I've talked about them in other videos. I've heard arguments that Trump had to do it that way because there were so many problems with these prosecutions, and if he pardoned some, it would end up, he would have to pardon all, and the DOJ would be fighting all this, and it would just be I don't know, a mess. It would just make a mess if he only pardoned some. And some people far more knowledgeable than me and experienced than me in these matters, that's what they argue, is that Trump, it was either all or nothing when it came to January 6th pardons. I don't know if they're right or not. I sincerely do not know. But what I sincerely believe is that the way Trump went about it with the January 6th pardon was not the best way. Anyway, his team applied for a motion to dismiss, or they filed a motion to dismiss, I should say, based on Trump's pardon. because again, they're forwarding the conspiracy theories of the left and the right that this had to do with January 6th, that what their client, the behavior their client is charged with engaging in, is connected to January 6th, and therefore Trump's pardon applies to him. Very interesting argument. I don't expect them, and I did not expect them to succeed on that argument. And we have the judge's order to go over. So, welcome. Going to catch up on this case, and then I'm going to make a few more videos catching up on other cases and a podcast episode too. So, since this last time, there's been some hearings, there's been various motions to deal with the time, the clock, and the schedule, and all this stuff. And then, boom, June 22nd, we have the Court of Appeals decision, and they affirm, yeah, this guy needs to stay in jail. The district court's order holding him without bond pending the outcome of his trial was correct. And sorry, bud, you're staying in jail for now, which makes all the sense in the world. And then a couple weeks after that, we have the order on the motion to dismiss, which the judge denied. And the judge denied it in a simple 3-page order. I actually thought he would go into it more than this, but I like that he didn't. I like he kept it really succinct. And we're going to read this very short 2.5 pages from United States District Judge Amir H. Ali, who many suspected might be kind of sympathetic to Cole, but he's sympathetic to me in this order by keeping things very concise. All right. United States charges Cole with interstate transportation of explosives, malicious attempt to use explosives, attempted use of weapons of mass destruction, and an act of terrorism while armed. And Cole moves to dismiss all these charges, arguing that the conduct he is accused of falls within the president's January 20th, 2025 pardon. Because the pardon by its terms does not apply to Cole, the court denies his motion. On January 20th, 2025, the president issued a proclamation that commuted the sentences of several named individuals who had been convicted of participation in the January 6, 2021 riot at the U.S. Capitol and granted a full, complete, and unconditional pardon to all other individuals convicted of offenses related to events that occurred at or near the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. Man, if only it said convicted of offenses of violence, and then let the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys and all those other assholes have to fight it out for years in court on appeals. It just seems like such a better way to go about it. Anyway, seems like the right way, not just a better way, the right way. Okay, I'll step off that horse and get onto this document. The president also directed the attorney general to pursue dismissal with prejudice to the government of all pending indictments against individuals for their conduct related to the events at or near the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. This line, pursue with prejudice to the government, I believe that means that the government can't refile the case against them. According to Cole, the president's pardon applies to him because he's accused of planting 2 pipe bombs near the Democratic National Committee and Republican National Committee headquarters on January 5th, 2021, the day before the Capitol riot. But the pardon does not apply to him. When the president exercises his pardon power, a court's sole responsibility is to interpret and apply the pardon. Courts use the usual tools of interpretation to determine the meaning of the pardon's language, which controls I don't understand why he wrote the. I don't understand why there's a comma and then it says that, which controls. I'm not sure. The pardon says that it applies to individuals convicted of offenses related to the events that occurred at or near the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021, even assuming that the conduct Cole is charged with is related to events that occurred at or near the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. The pardon is expressly limited to people who had been convicted of offenses related to those events. Cole had not been convicted of the conduct at issue when the president issued the pardon. Indeed, he has not been charged until many months after the president's proclamation. Cole does not try to explain how a pardon for individual convicted of offenses applies to him, and he shifts to a new theory in his reply brief that the president's directive to the attorney general to, quote, pursue dismissal with prejudice of the government of all pending indictments requires the Attorney General to dismiss the charges against him. But this argument does not work either. Cole was first charged in December 2025, months after the president's proclamation. He therefore did not have pending indictments at the time of the president's directive. For these reasons, his motion to dismiss is denied. So the argument that they're specifically dealing with here is that the pardon, by the language of the pardon, does not apply because it has to be an individual convicted of offenses, or it has to be an individual who was facing pending indictments. He sets aside here whether or not it was related to January 6, 2021, and he does so in a way that acknowledges it may not be related, because he says, even assuming that the conduct Cole is charged with is related to events that occurred at or near the United States Capitol. One of my puppers is behind me barking in their sleep. I don't know if y'all heard that over me talking. Funny story, when I started this and I did my mic check and I made my little recording of me checking the mic and all this stuff, more pretending that I'm a professional than actually doing something professional. My dog let out this groan, like, oh, here we go again. He's going to be talking to his computer for the next few hours. They went, and then laid over. It was very comedic. All right, so that's it for that right there. Let me see what else happened, because there was another filing that caught my attention. Aha. So the other thing going on in this case, since I last made a video about it, is that his defense is engaging in, I'm not sure. I think I've called it, I think I called it dirty, or it's like underhanded, but not quite. I don't like it, but if I was the attorney, or if I was the defendant, I would want my attorneys to do the absolute best job for me that they could, of course. And Cole's entitled to this, and I don't make any judgment about his attorneys. Like, I'm not judging their character, although I think they've made some specious arguments in this case so far, especially early on they did. And I think they're aiming to do that here. What they're asking for is all of this investigative material that focused on other possible suspects, namely Shawnee Kirkhoff, the U.S. Capitol Police officer who then went to work at the CIA and has been maligned by the Blaze and Joseph Hanneman and Steve Baker, who she is now in a lawsuit against. And I think she's very likely to win that lawsuit. I thought about covering that lawsuit, but I haven't decided. I don't know. Maybe I should, but in a way, I'm covering it anyway by consequence of covering this one. And Cole's defense team has been filing these motions for the return of early subpoenas, and they want to look at the polygraph exam and the examiner, and they want to have all this investigative material. And their whole reason is because they want to muddy, and so they want to muddy the picture that the prosecutors are trying to paint of Cole and what Cole did. And they want to plant in the jury's mind, the future jury, they want to plant in their mind that there might have been someone else and the FBI got the wrong guy. And even though Cole is going to be facing a jury, if this makes it the jury trial, he's going to be facing a jury of DC residents, and they're going to be very, very to the left, very, very anti-Trump, anti-MAGA. Remember, both sides have their own conspiracy theories about things. And so I think their gambit here is that the jury might end up being sympathetic to the idea that Trump's FBI got the wrong dude. And I haven't seen Cole, and I haven't seen any recent videos of him. And by recent, I mean the past like two years or 3 years. Nothing I can make a judgment off of how he comes across, but say they put him on the stand, which I don't know that they would, but I wonder if they're one of the things that they might aim for in a jury trial is to present Cole in a way that could make the jury sympathetic to him as a person of color, a person who has some sort of he's on the autism spectrum, a person who has OCD, and they might try and garner this is a some sympathy for him, even if it's just a little bit of sympathy for him, and then have some sympathy for his dislike of both parties, particularly Trump, is what they're going to seize on, I think, and then um, the conspiracy theories about what the left thinks January 6th was about and how the pipe bombs factored into it, which they got their own set of them, and then try and sow this doubt that there was this other suspect. And this can be done, we've seen this done to the extreme with the Epstein case and Maxwell case, where Massey and others, so many others, almost everybody on Congress, forced DOJ to declassify and publish all of these investigative files. And people have just gone crazy picking out every little thing in there and misconstruing it and misunderstanding it and then misrepresenting it as something other than it ever was. And it's just a fact that most people do not understand at all how an investigation works and why an investigation would take a look at any one person and then decide to move on from them. And FBI case files and any police agency law enforcement case file just about is going to have a whole bunch of false leads in it. It makes sense that it would, and it's going to have bad information in it. And the investigators, it's their job to suss out what information is good, what information is relevant, and then follow that evidence to the criminal. Along the way, you end up picking picking up a bunch of other information that isn't relevant to your investigation, or is only tangentially irrelevant, or is a false lead. And you may think this one person is involved for a short time or a long time. You may suspect this person's involved, and then you develop the evidence and find out, no, they weren't. You were wrong. Or they were connected to it in a way that wasn't criminal. But when you turn over all this stuff to just everybody, and people have an axe to grind, and clicks and views bring money in, which of course I rely on, people just go crazy with it. Same thing here. They're hoping to maximize that potentiality by bringing in information that the FBI developed around Ms. Kirchhoff. And so they filed a motion to get those materials for the return of subpoenas and any and all evidence related to the investigation into Mr. Dickert, who was her roommate, I believe, and Ms. Kirchhoff, her boyfriend, live-in boyfriend, I believe. And also Dr. Michael Nierenberg, who did the gait analysis for Kirchhoff, and the polygraph examiner, because there's information that she failed the polygraph exam, which people have run wild with that, saying that proves their guilt. So they want to order on this, and they want all of these things unsealed. I don't think the judge has ruled on it. No, they have not. And then there's a motion here for access to partially sealed transcripts. Because, let's see, where were these transcripts from? Actually moves the court for an order to permit the court reporter to transcribe and provide to counsel of record in this case, under seal, portions of all hearings held in the above captioned matter, provided that the party requesting access was a participant in the under seal portion of the hearing. I wonder what they're looking for. I wonder what they want to go back over in their transcripts. I wonder if there's something happened in one of their in an under seal hearing where the defense counsel made an error that the prosecution wants to highlight at some point. Not sure. Okay. I am not going to go over all 35 pages, I believe this is, of this motion. And this was, there's 4 pages right here with instructions at the end of this. And then there's find This is weird. Why is this like this? It seems like it repeats. It's not actually 35 pages long. It's 8 pages. And then copy of the subpoena. Instructions, 4 pages of instructions, and then it repeats. And repeats again. Repeats again. They've made an error here. There's some sort of mistake here with them filing this, I think. Maybe they put a copy of each person. Is that what it is? This is to Shawnee Kirkhoff. Let me see if the other one is to a different person. Yep, it is. Okay, it's not a mistake. I'm just not seeing it clearly what it is. Okay. They've attached to this motion the subpoenas they want the judge to approve. And they have one for each individual person here, and a document describing the rules that apply and instructions for them to follow. Okay. Suffice to say, what they want is everything from that person that could possibly be related to January 6th and the government's investigation of them, everything about the polygraph, everything about the analysis, all the messages between them, all the evidence that the FBI developed on them. So how many pages is their actual motion for it? Legal standard. It's very short. Okay, I will read it to you. Okay. All right. This is Cold's attorneys. They argue Shawnee Kirkhoff was named as a person of interest in the January 5th, 6th. See how they do that? See how I understand why, but my guard is up against trying to conflate some of this. So I'm noticing how they call it the January 5th through 6th, 2021 pipe bomb investigation. Look, I understand why it would be called that. It was planted on the 5th and discovered on the 6th. Subtle thing, though. I wonder if they'll continue that the whole time, and they'll keep calling it January 5th and 6th pipe bomb. Right. Ms. Kirkhoff was a U.S. Capitol police officer on January 6, 2021, and was present at the Capitol on that date. Ms. Kirkhoff now works for the CIA. According to discovery produced by the government in this case, the FBI began investigating, questioning, and covertly surveilling Ms. Kirkhoff during the time it began investigating Mr. Cole. On November 6, 2025, Ms. Kirkhoff was interviewed by the FBI and took a polygraph examination. She was asked 2 relevant questions. 1, did you place those pipe bombs? And 2, did you place those pipe bombs that evening? Ms. Kirkhoff failed the polygraph. See, this is the type of... She was asked a lot of questions as part of a polygraph. She was asked, those aren't the only 2 questions she was asked. It doesn't say that they were. But they select these 2 questions and then tell you she failed the polygraph. And you're supposed to infer that means that she lied in her answer to those 2 questions. The FBI polygraph examiner noted Kirkhoff's very controlled reaction to the news of her failing the polygraph and seemingly rehearsed responses to examiner's questions. Remember, she works at the CIA now. She went through a whole bunch of examination to go to the CIA, including polygraphs. On November 7, 2025, 5 days before the FBI opened a file on Mr. Cole, the FBI named Ms. Kirkhoff as a person of interest in the pipe bomb investigation and opened a file on her. The government immediately issued subpoenas and preservation requests for numerous electronic accounts associated with Ms. Kirkhoff. On November 12, 2025, the same day the government officially opened its investigation into Mr. Cole, FBI agents attempted to question Ms. Kirkhoff and Mr. Dickert at her residence. The next day, the FBI interviewed Ms. Kirkhoff's dog walker. The following day, Ms. Kirkhoff and her boyfriend, Daniel Dickert, also a Capitol police officer, were interviewed together by the FBI and attorney Ballantyne, prosecutor Ballantyne. Throughout the November 2025 FBI, throughout that month of November 2025, the FBI interviewed Ms. Kirkhoff's coworkers at the Capitol Police. Her neighbors surveilled her without her knowledge, requested her employment records from the CIA, and sent surveillance footage of her walking to a podiatrist, likely for a gait analysis. Mr. Cole was arrested on December 5th, 2025, a month later. The FBI closed the surveillance lead on Ms. Kirchhoff on January 7th, 2026. Mr. Cole requests the issuance and early return of 3 subpoenas relevant to Ms. Kirchhoff. One, a subpoena to Ms. Kirchhoff for video that she took of the dog being taken at her home, with her voice allegedly in the background, purportedly from the evening of January 5th, 2021, shown to FBI agents by her or Mr. Dickert in November 2025. I've seen that video somewhere. It's public. And any other photo, video, or audio created on the same device on January 5th, 2021. B, the identity of the phones on which the dog video was stored. Ms. Kirchhoff's employment records. C, her records from the CIA in her possession, her offer letter from the CIA, and her standard Form 86 questionnaire that she completed for her job at the CIA. D, documents provided by Ms. Kirchhoff to the government as part of its pipe bomb investigation. E, Ms. Kirchhoff's home camera recordings from January 5th through 6th, 2021. F, communications between Ms. Kirchhoff and Mr. Dickert from January 5th through 6th, 2021. G, the identity of the electronic devices used by Ms. Kirchhoff from December 15th, 2020 through January 8th, 2021. H, documents reflecting Ms. Kirchhoff's work schedule on January 5th, 2021. I, communications between Ms. Kirchhoff and family members. So they want to do their own investigation. J, communications between Ms. Kirchhoff and the government and Ms. Kirchhoff and Mr. Dickert from November 1st, 2025 through present related to her polygraph. The January 5th through 6th pipe bomb investigation and any photo and video purporting alibi for her whereabouts on January 5th, 2021. K, documents and communications about services used to wipe publicly available information about Ms. Kirchhoff. And L, the phone number and carrier of any device Ms. Kirchhoff used on January 5th through 6th, 2021, provided by her employer. A subpoena to Daniel Dickert, Ms. Kirchhoff's boyfriend, and a U.S. Capitol Police officer essentially asked for the exact same stuff, minus the CIA employment thing. It asked for a purchase from a receipt he made on a receipt from a purchase he made on January 5th, 2021. And then a subpoena to Dr. Michael Nierenberg for documents and communications concerning the foot gait analysis that he performed, which is a thing this guy does. I looked up his website before, and that's a focus of his is gait analysis, and it's been used in other cases. Suddenly everybody who's a insane conspiracy theorist is a rabid supporter of gait analysis and advocate for it. And it's funny. I bet I doubt 9 out of 10 of them had never heard of gait analysis until Steve Baker and Hanneman came up with their boneheaded theory about Kirchhoff. Okay, so that's the state of things in United States v. Cole. We don't have a ruling yet on this from the judge, but I do not believe the judge is going to allow a bunch of material from a dead end portion of the investigation to January 6th. I don't believe that is going to happen. We'll see, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't believe there's anything else particularly pending in this case at this moment. They might file another motion to dismiss for some other thing, but my expectations for this case are that it doesn't make it to trial, especially if they can't bring in material related to the Kirchhoff portion of the investigation. If they can't, I don't think this makes it to trial. I think instead what's going to happen is that he's going to do a plea agreement for some of those charges, and he's going to get so many years in prison plus so many years parole. And I think that's probably best. He'll take a plea deal at some point, I believe. But until then, they're going to prepare for a trial in which they can sow doubt in the jury's mind that this is the right person. That's their best argument. Their best argument is that the FBI may have gotten the wrong person. And the reason I say that's their best argument, their best defense of their client, is because Cole confessed. There's no getting around that Cole confessed. Now, leading up to the trial, I'm sure they're going to try and get his confession thrown out. I'm sure they're going to file motions to suppress his confession. And those will be pretty interesting because I think through the course of the back and forth between those, we'll learn more about his confession and learn more about the things he said. It was recorded, so we may even get to see those videos. I would really, really like to see the moment he turns and says, "You know what? You got me. I'll walk you through it. I did it. I'll walk you through everything I did." I would really love for that video to come out and everybody get to see and hear him confess and describe each step of the process he went through to purchase these things, construct the devices, why he did it. Oh, I would love it if that video comes out. I think it'd be very good for the country, for both sides, if they could see that video. Would everybody accept it? No. But I think it would go a long way to undoing the damage that is being done by the misinformation and disinformation that's out there. All right. So that's your update in the United States. Be Cole. I'm going to go on to the next video. See you in the next one. All right. So today, Anthony Fauci is on Capitol Hill testifying before the Senate committee that's looking at COVID-19 and the history of the pandemic and our response to it. And it's going about as well as you would expect. Hawley is asking him what day of the week it is, and Fauci pleads the fifth. And Josh Hawley asks him, "What color is the tie that you're wearing?" And Fauci pleads the fifth. And he's pled the fifth to every single thing he's been asked. It doesn't matter who it's coming from. He reads a statement his lawyers wrote for him, which he has several lawyers with him, including former Senator Bob Goldbars Menendez's lawyer, who specializes in corruption cases and is the lawyer, according to media, he's the lawyer you call when it's time to grab the oh shit handle because you're about to go for a legal ride and you need he's a high power lawyer. I gotta bite my tongue about some other jokes I want to make. All right, so Fauci's there, and I always feel in these moments, I think of them as like a 2-minute hate out of Orwell. That's a lot of what's going on here is the 2-minute hate of Fauci. Yesterday and today, that's what's happening, and I completely understand it. You won't hear me defend Fauci, but you will hear me temper things because I feel like Fauci has been propped up as the face of the pandemic and the COVID response in the U.S., and he's become the villain to many and a hero to others. And it depends on whether you prefer your elected representative have an R or a D next to their name, whether he's a hero or a villain. And that's just a sad state of affairs for the country to be in. He does deserve the blame for many, many things. I don't have any sympathy for him and what he's going through here. But him pleading the Fifth Amendment during this theater that's occurring, and I don't mean to devalue it, but it certainly is theater, and everybody's that's there is participating in that theater, including the people in the audience and the questioners and Fauci himself. But he's pleading the fifth to every single thing that happens. And as Kyle Chaney over at Politico notes, it's tricky for him to plead the fifth here. He's already been pardoned for all of the conduct that preceded the pardon that he was given in January 2025. He's not been pardoned for the things that have happened since January 2025, any conduct he's been engaged in since then. And were he to answer these questions, if he were to say that the day of the week is Saturday instead of Wednesday, conceivably he could be prosecuted for obstruction or for perjury. If he were to say anything that is slightly off, he could be prosecuted for this testimony here. So it's completely understandable that he pleads the fifth. If you were in his shoes, your lawyers would advise you to plead the fifth because the whole point of here is to set up a perjury trap for him to get him to misspeak. It's the clever decision, but it is tricky because since he's being asked about stuff that is covered by the pardon, the Fifth Amendment, he doesn't really need to plead it. He can plead it anytime he wants to, but does he really need to plead it? It looks bad, doesn't it? it comes off really bad that this is the conduct you've been pardoned for, and yet you're refusing to answer even the most basic questions. But you're not answering any question at all. Your response to everything is the fifth. And it opens him up to being held in contempt and prosecuting on that basis, because he could be held in contempt of the committee. Would a contempt charge from the Senate based on this and referral to DOJ on that, would it succeed? I don't think it would, but I think we could see that happen. I think we could see Rand Paul decide, you know what, let's just take a shot at it. The American people will appreciate it. Whatever we can do to make Fauci suffer, that's what we'll do. Again, it's a sad state of affairs, but it's understandable that these circumstances are happening. Anyway, the point of my video is not to talk about Fauci in the hearing. The point of my video here is to talk about United States v. David Morens, Fauci's former senior advisor at the NIAID, where Fauci was top dog. Morens was indicted on charges of concealment and destruction of records and conspiracy, aiding and abetting, of all of those things. He was indicted on these charges back in April of this year. And since then, this case has barely had any filings. I'm following cases that were filed first week of July that already have 170 filings in them. This one was filed in April and it has 34 filings in it. It's been a very slow moving case. And I have found that particularly notable because of how many co-conspirators are mentioned and not mentioned in the indictment. And I found it very interesting because when this indictment was filed, back on April 16th, there's a notice of a related case, which we can't see. And the fourth and fifth entry on the docket are not available to the public. And if you remember, ever since Pacer got hacked by the Russians and some other groups, Scattered Spider was one of them. Ever since that happened, the court system in the U.S. has decided to not put sealed filings onto the docket at all, because they don't want them to, if there's another compromise, they don't want them to be accessed. And it's very dangerous for those things to be accessed because bad actors, even if they're just a hacker in some bedroom in the Eastern Bloc or in Spain or in the UK, as it was with Scattered Spiders, they could find out who witnesses are, who the informants are, what are some sealed search warrants, and then they could sell that information to criminal organizations and blow up an investigation or a prosecution before it really gets started, right? Or they could give over information about witnesses, and those witnesses could be under threat. So those things are left off now, and it's pretty frustrating as a court watcher to not be able to see those things. But it's also intriguing here because I strongly suspect that Dr. David Morens will not be the only person indicted in relation to the conspiracy that he was part of. And I thought that since Fauci is up on Capitol Hill today and in the news, and since this case I haven't touched on since it was first announced, I think I've made one video on this case, and it was just going over the indictment because there hasn't really been anything else that has occurred here. Yep. There hasn't been anything else that has occurred in this case that's really worth me getting into. I thought what would be good to do would be to go over all the times that Fauci is mentioned in this indictment. And it turns out he's mentioned 35 times. The indictment is 29 pages. Fauci is mentioned 35 times in those 29 pages. It makes sense he would be mentioned. Morens was his top advisor. But Fauci's not charged here, and Fauci is not really factored into this conspiracy. There's something kind of unusual going on that stands out to me, and I haven't seen anyone else highlight, and that is that Fauci doesn't seem to be part of he doesn't seem to be in on the conspiracy that Morens and the others ran, and that's because their conspiracy was aimed at influencing Fauci and the NIH. And they needed the conspiracy to do it because they needed to do it in a clever way in order to hide where that influence was coming from. Morens was the conduit for that influence. Behind him was Peter Daszak of EcoHealth and what's his name? Steve Kush or Roger Kush or whatever his name is from Boston, and others who conspired to get EcoHealth's bat coronavirus grant reinstated. And Gerald Kush, that's the name. And Fauci's not looped in on their little thing. Fauci's not looped in on their scheme to avoid FOIA. And we know he wasn't looped in because it's not anywhere in this, not only because it's not anywhere in the indictment, but because Fauci ended up being exposed recently for all of his, let me pull up over here. Get this over here. Fauci's recently been exposed for his diary that he kept, which was, he wrote on government computers. For years, Fauci used government devices to write diary entries and take notes and write down everything that happened to him while he was serving in his role. And if he had been looped in on what Morens and Daszak and others were up to, he would have known better than to put all this stuff on a government computer where it could be FOIA'd, where it could be, where it was subject to Federal Records Act. Morens was aware of the Federal Records Act and FOIA and sought to avoid it. That's why he's been indicted. Fauci, though, wrote diary entries on government computers. 1,000+ pages, I believe, is what Paul has released. I mean, here going back to 2012, Big Day Today was official celebration of World AIDS Day. Beautiful, chilly fall day with bright sun. So, and even during the pandemic, it continues. I don't want you to think that it wasn't going on in 2012. It continues into the pandemic. So, I find that really interesting because it goes back to the villain thing. And I think the point I want to make about it is Fauci's not just the villain. He's the villain for the 2-minute hate. He's the villain on screen that everybody's directing their hate to. And yet under him, around him, and tangential to him are so many others who were corrupted, who were corruptible, who made bad choices, who made mistakes, who were greedy, who were self-aggrandizing, who were narcissistic, who were in bed with the CCP, like Daszak. So many others who are just as much or more so to blame for mechanically how things went wrong. But Fauci is the face of how things went wrong. And Fauci is exposed more so than ever by these diaries because what he wrote in them contradicts what he said publicly during the pandemic. So real quick, well, I don't know how quick it's going to be. Depends on how much ad lib I do. That'd be useful to look at this indictment and notice how Fauci features in it. Now, to do this is a little tricky. The indictment is a PDF. It's a scanned image of a document. And so I can't Control F and search through this indictment. I can use the text of it that is scanned on, that is copy pasted onto Pacer. I can do that, but it's not nice to read. I don't enjoy this font. I don't enjoy how it's formatted. It includes all this extra information there, and it's just kind of clunky. That's a good word for it. It makes it very clunky to read it here. But this is where I did a scan of Fauci in here, which he's mentioned in here as senior NIAID official, and found that he was mentioned 35 times. And then what I've done is I took this document, this PDF, and I used a website that I just found called Product Documentize or something like that. Documentize is what they call it here. And you can drag and drop PDFs here to this site, and it will scan it for the text and turn it into a text file for you, or turn it into a searchable PDF for you, which is extremely useful. It did it for free. This 29-page document, it took it about 5 minutes, maybe just a little bit less to do. And so I have that document right. That was me. There we go. I have it right here, and as you can see, it looks like it's a real indictment from Pacer. But if I type in official, I can now search it, and it gives me 27 results. And I was playing around with it, trying to figure out why there was a discrepancy with it. And I figured out that one of the consequences of doing this scan is this. See how I just highlighted all that? I need to move my face. Right, so I can highlight the word official, but when I jump over to this word, this space right here between senior and NIAD, it sees that as being the whole document. See that? It won't let me highlight this entire word, which means when I do a search for the word, it finds one part of it. It finds the word up to this point, and it finds the word senior. Almost, it doesn't find the R. So that means it misses this word right here. So what I'm going to do, or this entry of the term I'm searching for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up this on the other side of my screen. Y'all won't see it. I'm going to have the search I did earlier so that we can see each one of these entries when we scan through this. And that way I won't miss anything. The first mention of Fauci is in paragraph 4. Now, before I go through each entry of his name, I want to go back to there we go. Sorry, this is a little wonky. I'm moving things around on my screen. Okay, that there, this here. Nothing changed for y'all, but things just radically changed for me on my screen. All right, so before we do that, I want to go back to my thread on X and catch everybody up on a couple things and show you something you may not know. So, as I wrote, 29-page indictment of Dr. David Morens, Fauci's former senior advisor at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, the NIAID. He was there from 2006 to 2022 advising Fauci. And in the indictment, he's mentioned 35 times. The conspiracy that Morens faces charges for being a party to was one where he and EcoHealth's Peter Daszak, Boston University's Gerald Kusch, and others created a back channel to Fauci through Morens. Daszak's EcoHealth had since 2014 a grant from the NIH for studying bat coronaviruses. EcoHealth worked with and sent some of that grant money to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Now, co-conspirator 1 in this indictment is Peter Daszak. Co-conspirator 2 is Gerald Kusch. Okay. And you'll see it in a minute. Company number 1 is EcoHealth Alliance. The institute, or the learning university, or the academic university, or academic institution, whatever it's referred to in the indictment, is Boston University. Gerald Kusch was an infectious disease researcher with Boston University's National Emerging Infectious Disease Laboratory. And that matters because he wants money. Daszak brought Kush on board as a co-investigator, and through EcoHealth, they jointly applied for and received an NIH grant in June 2019 for funding of an emerging infectious disease regional center, the EIDRC. That acronym's going to come up again. In April 2020, EcoHealth's grant from the NIH was paused and then canceled. They sent a letter to him, or to EcoHealth, on April 19th, 2020, saying, hey, we're reviewing allegations that you guys were working with Wuhan on the coronavirus that's responsible for the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're pausing the grant we awarded to you. No funds will be dispensed until the investigation is over. Just 5 days later, they sent an email to Daszak telling him, we terminated that grant. But that was only for the bat coronavirus research grant. The grant from NIH for the EIDRC was still pending at that time. And Kush wanted Daszak to fight for the bat coronavirus grant to be reinstated, but he wrote in an email, quote, certainly not before the EIDRC funding comes through. So it seems they were like, uh-oh, EcoHealth's under scrutiny for our relationship with Wuhan. We want to get that bat coronavirus grant reinstated so we can continue our work and get money. But we already have applied through EcoHealth to the NIH for a grant for this other thing that we're trying to get started. So let's not rock the boat yet. Let's be strategic about how we lobby for the reinstatement of that bat coronavirus grant. Now, eventually, a grant would come around later for the EIDRC, but at this time of cancellation, it wasn't available yet. It was still pending. The day after the bat coronavirus grant was terminated, Morens emailed Daszak and Kuch from his personal Gmail. Quote, this is sent from my Gmail account. Please send all replies here to Gmail. There are things I can't say except Fauci is aware, and I have learned that there are ongoing efforts within NIH to steer through this with minimal damage to you, Peter Daszak, and colleagues, and to NIH and NIAID. Now, where he says that Fauci is aware, it's not clear what Fauci is aware of here. Fauci is aware of EcoHealth's grant being canceled. Plausible. Fauci is aware that I'm emailing you from my personal Gmail account. Possible, but I think unlikely. Because that would be like saying, hey, my boss knows I'm circumventing the Federal Records Act and FOIA and communicating with you on a private, via private channels now. Doubtful that he would volunteer that information to his boss. Doubtful that he would feel the need to tell the others. I don't think why would he tell Fauci? Why would you tell the person you're seeking to lobby, at least partially? Yeah. Their target. Yeah. Why would you tell the person you're going to lobby to get something done? Hey, I've established a secret off-site, off-government servers and computers channel of communication, a back channel, if you will, for me and these other guys to conspire to get you to get this grant reinstated. He's the target of your influence. Why would you alert him that you have this secret group where you talk about how you're going to influence him? Doesn't make a lot of sense. So I think what he means is Fauci is aware that the grant's been canceled. There are things I can't say except Fauci is aware, and I have learned that there are ongoing efforts within NIH to steer through this with minimal damage to you, Peter Daszak, your colleagues, NIH and NIAID. I think what he's saying is Fauci's aware of the cancellation. There's things I can't tell you right here, but everybody's in damage control mode. And that's to your benefit. Got crisis on our hands. Fauci knows about the crisis. I think that's what he's saying, because he feels they're already in their mind. Okay, how are we gonna survive this, and how are we gonna get things back to the way they were? The next day, Daszak wrote back to him, David will communicate with you via Gmail from now on. And he seems to be doing it on the behalf of everybody in the group, because he CC'd others. It doesn't say who they were, but he CC'd others into this conversation. Why would they need to communicate in this way, though? Well, it's because of what they described as the dreaded FOIAs. And why did they dread those FOIAs? Well, it wasn't just because it took a lot of time to respond to them, even though that's what they wrote in that sentence at that time. The FOIAs could expose the crooked scheme these folks were engineering. In the wake of the grant being canceled, they set up a back channel to Fauci through Moren's in an effort to, one, navigate the firestorm EcoHealth was caught in, two, lobby NIH to reinstate the EcoHealth grant, three, ensure EIDRC grant money came through, and four, control/influence the COVID origin narrative. Keeping their communications off government channels also protected parties to the conspiracy, including Daszak, who had clear conflict of interest. It also protected UNC's Ralph Barrick, Fauci, and others. It's most important that Fauci, this is a quote from one of the emails, it's most important that Fauci not have anything on the record that could come back to bite. He wrote that when complaining about the FOIAs. He writes, quote, the possibility that NIH funded scientists or other esteemed scientists are in cahoots with politicians wanting to attack him, Fauci, or NIAID. Morens added that it might be best to connect you two in an off-the-record manner, meaning connect Daszak with Fauci. We are getting FOIA'd nonstop, so it's most important that Fauci not have anything on the record that could come back to bite him. It's really curious to me that they're getting FOIA'd nonstop and they're in protection mode, yet Fauci keeps on writing his diary on government computers. I mean, maybe he's just a boomer and he doesn't understand that those computers are subject to FOIA. He doesn't understand that when he leaves his government job, the records are going to be that he's writing in his diary are going to be kept by the government forever. I don't know. But Morens is aware of it, and he's telling this other group to be careful. He's also wanting Daszak and Fauci to talk face to face about getting the grant reinstated and whatever else. Again, Morens doesn't loop Fauci into their little conspiracy here, which is interesting to me. Just a couple days after entering into this conspiracy, Moren sent non-public NIH documents to Daszak, who's EcoHealth's board chair, and Dajak's chief of staff. Those are all people that may be charged here, or may be cooperating witnesses, or Morens is unindicted co-conspirator at this time. I mean, Daszak is. He's an unindicted co-conspirator at this time. So is Kush. But these other guys, we may see indictments of them as well down the road. With this information, they could better attune their lobbying for reinstatement/approval of grants and influence narratives. Morens was taking, as Fauci's advisor, he was privy to all of this internal discussion, and it was also his job to help Fauci when it came to policy and pandemic response and strategy and all of these things. And he was taking the internal information documents that were in memos that were circulated within NIH and NIAID, and he was turning those things over and also informing Daszak and Kush and others in this group about what was going on internally in non-public ways, so that these guys could strategize on how they were going to influence NIH. So, for example, NIH is very concerned about let's tailor our lobbying efforts to ease their concerns about subject matter A and refocus them on subject matter B, or distract them with C or whatever. And they came up with a plan. They ended up pinning some articles. By the first week of May 2020, Morens was pulling in members of a prominent professional medical organization to defend Daszak and EcoHealth. I believe this to be the American Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene, the ASTMH, where Morens had been a fellow since 2015 and has chaired their committee on arthropod-borne and zoonotic viruses. On July 3rd, 2020, Moren submitted a paper titled, quote, "The Origin of COVID-19 and Why It Matters." And he submitted that to the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. Kush, and by the way, I'm not sure that's exactly how you pronounce his name, but I'm going with it, is a co-author of the paper. That paper is still available. It is right here, The Origin of COVID-19 and Why It Matters. You can see David Morens here. And you can see David Kush right here. Gerald Kush. I don't know why I want to call him David. And there's these other authors as well. Something I didn't know until recently, which I learned from the journal entries of Fauci. Let me pull this up right here. And not from the journal entries of Fauci, sorry, from other documents that Rand Paul released, is this conversation here. There's a whole bunch of emails that and texts that have come out from Rand Paul's investigation, or the committee's investigation on COVID-19, and these exchanges are between the folks who wrote the seminal and maybe the most cited research paper in history, the proximal origins of COVID-19. Where is that proximal origin? Where is the actual document? I want the actual document. Thought I had it pulled up in a window. I must have accidentally closed it. No. Sorry, fella. I just want a link to the document. Brave is not doing good work right now. I want a link to the actual document. Why is it not? Why is that not the top result? Why is the top result not the actual thing I'm looking for? It's right here. Look, it lists all of these articles about it. Take me to the actual paper. That's not it. The original publication. Okay. This paragraph's about the original. Oh. Is this going to be it? It is. There we go. Okay. Here are the authors: Anderson, Rambo, Lipkin, Holmes, Gary. All right. So this paper, which is, I've read, the most cited scientific paper, research paper in the history of the world, not because it's so great, but because there was so much interest and so many, the whole world was affected by COVID. And this came out in March of 2020. So everybody was going through this document, and it was used to shut down lab theory and all this, because of this was pushing the zoonotic explanation for it. And they say right here, our analysis clearly shows SARS-CoV-2 is not a laboratory construct or a purposefully manipulated virus, which doesn't exclude the lab thing. But anyway, This document, I'm bringing it up because Ed Holmes here, one of the authors, says, I've seen David Morens, Fauci's right hand man, in uniform plenty of times, and he asked me to be part of his paper. Where is that at? Right. David Morens asked me to be involved, but I thought I should stay out of it. And that is in reply to Christian Anderson, one of the other authors, right here, Christian Anderson, where they are citing Moren's document here. Good origin section starting at the end of page 3 from Tobenberger here. And that links to this right here, the origin of COVID-19 and why it matters. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because Moren's was trying to bring in the authors of this paper or this document that this research paper he penned, which was pushing or was building on their paper earlier. But the aim of this one was specifically to tailor a research paper to the liking of NIH, so NIH would be more amenable to reinstating the back coronavirus grant. To that end, he tried to loop in this guy. Another thing about David Morens and research papers, him and Fauci, according to a statement at the hearing today, authored one of the questioners. I don't remember if it was Hawley or Johnson or somebody. I don't remember. They mentioned that David Morens and Anthony Fauci authored over 50 scientific research papers together. On July 3rd, 2020, Moren submitted that paper. The following month, NIH approved the grant for the EIDRC, $7.5 million. Morens immediately emailed Daszak to ask about getting a kickback. He wrote, do I get a kickback? Question mark many, many times, like he's a teen girl. Too much fucking money. Do you deserve it all? Let's discuss. And perhaps the most prescient response imaginable. Daszak replied, of course there's a kickback. It starts with 5 more years of FOIA request. Just hope it doesn't culminate in 5 years in federal jail. A little over a year later, cracks were forming in their conspiracy. A FOIA request targeting Moren's NIAID address threatened to expose their scheme. Daszak wrote to the others to warn them, and in so doing, confessed to the whole damn thing. He wrote, David's NIH email address was FOIA'd, and they're pulling out emails to me or Fauci about Wuhan. You're in some of these. We started using David's Gmail address in April 2020, around the time of the cancellation of our grant. But some slipped through the net, as is expected. There is some embarrassing stuff in there. The most heinous is some details of what happened with the NIH cancellation and what my response to that was and how you helped me shape it. If these emails are with reporters, they'll use them to create stories as per above. And the headlines like, quote, powerful cabal of scientists from within NIH helped draft anti-lab leak narrative. And Daszak suspected Wuhan may have continued gain of function work outside of NIH. Those last two hypothetical headlines are what we call embedded confessions, aren't they? And now, 5 years on, the years of FOIA requests have turned to potential prison time for Morens and possibly others. Indeed, Morens faces a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison for conspiracy, plus 20 years in prison for each of the other charges. But I find it hilariously prescient that Daszak wrote that 5 more years of FOIA, then 5 more years in federal jail, because 5 years for conspiracy is exactly what Morens is now facing after 5 years of FOIA. It's brilliant, and I love it. I love it. I love it. All right, let's go to that other thing that we were going to do. And let's look for the other mentions of Fauci. All right, let me get this up in the way I had it. You guys got this one. Where'd it go? Okay, let's go back up here. Paragraph 4 is where we start off. Then on my page, I'm going to do this. Okay. The first mentions happen right here, where it's just describing that Morens worked for Fauci. Here it says that Morens was responsible for advising Fauci in the meetings. He was responsible for aiding him and briefing the White House, the president, et cetera, et cetera. This is all job related mentions so far. Next one, this one flags is paragraph 28, but I think he might be mentioned before then. There we go. Okay, the other mention was it's nothing interesting for us. Right, on or about the first mention of substance where they're actually talking about things going on with COVID is right here. On or about January 27th, 2020, co-conspirator 1 emailed bullet points. That's Dajak. Emailed bullet points about EcoHealth's back coronavirus grant to Morens at his NIH email account. Dajak stated in the beginning of his email that he was providing this information so that Morens might relay it to Fauci for public use. Quote, a few things for your information and hopefully to pass on to Fauci for when he is being interviewed regarding the new COVID or new coronavirus. That same day, on or about January 27, 2020, Morens responded from his NIH email account stating, in relevant part, I will pass this on to Fauci. Morens then emailed the information provided to him by co-conspirator 1 to Fauci through Fauci's chief of staff. Now, something that stands out to me about this is that this is January 27th, 2020. This is before the cancellation of the grant. This is the day, January 27th, if I remember correctly, is the day that President Trump shut down flights from China, I think. Somewhere around there. And the firestorm really kicked off. Notice the route this information took. Dajak sent talking points to Morens because they're aware this thing's coming. A bunch of people in China are getting sick. It's spreading. We got to get on top of this. This is the next pandemic. We got to get on top of this. He says, I will, capital, communicate this to Fauci. But the route it takes to Fauci is through Fauci's chief of staff. So they're looping in people in. This is on the record. This is not through a back channel. This is direct and looping in other staff. Okay. This is above board, it seems to me. Next mention is page 12. Actually, he's mentioned before then. Let me scroll up. Right. There you go. FF. No, that was right. Okay. Records concerning Moren's access to Fauci and his use of that access to convey information on behalf of EcoHealth to influence Fauci. These are the records he destroyed. Morens, Dajak, and Kush and others known and unknown to the grand jury concealed the communications so they could utilize Moren's stature, connections, and access within the scientific community as a result of his position as senior advisor to Fauci to advance the interest of Company 1 within NIH and NIAID, the scientific community, and publicly. Then we go to paragraph 40, where he's mentioned again, but this scan didn't catch it. Dajak, Dajak and Kush and others known and unknown to the grand jury emailed information to Morens at Morens' non-government issued personal Gmail account for Morens to relay to Fauci, while instructing Morens to use means of communication that would not be discovered in a FOIA search. Next mention comes here, and the co-conspirators plotted to conceal federal records and evade FOIA. On or about April 15th, 2020, after learning about the cancellation of the bat coronavirus grant, Morens forwarded his communications with Dajak and Kush from his NIH email to his Gmail. Morens then emailed co-conspirator 1 and 2, that's Dajak and Kush, of course, stating, quote, "This is sent from my Gmail account. Please send all replies to Gmail. There are things I can't say, except Fauci is aware, and I have learned there are ongoing efforts within NIH to steer through this with minimal damage to you, Mr. Dajak, and colleagues, and NIH and NIAID. Everybody's in CYA mode." And also politicize the heck out of this because this is an election year. All right, next mention, April 28th, 2020, in an email entitled "More FOIAs are on the way," this time to NIAID, including emails to us. Dajak wrote to Morens to alert him about a group targeting Fauci and looking for emails to us and others regarding Wuhan. Morens responded by thanking Dajak for the heads up, stating, we all dread these FOIAs, they take up so much time. Next mention of Fauci. On or about February 23rd, 2021, Morens and co-conspirator 1 and 2 exchanged emails under the subject line "Briefing Fauci," where Kush told Morens to, quote, "pay attention to the email address you use," stating, "if you get FOIA'd and have to respond, it will have Dajak and, of lesser importance, me on the correspondence. The less we provide the enemy, the better." Who's the enemy in this instance, guys? The enemy are groups that are put in, individuals that are putting in FOIAs. The enemy is the public who is seeking transparency to find out what their tax dollars are going to. The enemy to Boston University's Gerald Kush is the American people who are interested in what the NIH is involved in as regards Wuhan and coronavirus research. That's damning. It speaks to their character, doesn't it? All right, next one. On or about February 24th, 2021, Morens emailed Dajak and Kush under the subject line "Briefing Fauci," which, remember, is part of his job. His job is to brief Fauci. But these guys have their own back channel where they're conspiring how they're going to influence Fauci. And so that one of them can get a grant. It's very crooked. It's extremely crooked. In part one, in part, quote, "I learned from our FOIA lady here how to make emails disappear after I am FOIA'd, but before the search starts. So I think we are all safe. Plus, I deleted most of these emails after sending them to Gmail. Fortunately for him, there are ways of recovering those deleted emails, and deleting them just makes you look more guilty." Right. Next mention. On or about February 25th, 2021, Morens emailed Dajak and Kush stating that he and Fauci received a huge FOIA yesterday, seeking any and all documents, emails, etc. that mention the words Wuhan Institute or WIV. Your names will not show up in this FOIA, at least not from my info. So now, February 2021, they're looking at these FOIAs and they're like, okay, is this going to catch any of us? Is this going to expose anything? The guilt has set in. Remember, 6 months earlier, or a little bit more, in July of 2020, they managed to get that $7.5 million grant awarded. Their influence worked. Their efforts paid off with their little conspiracy here. But now they're in like never-ending cover-up mode because of FOIAs that are coming in. And so as these FOIAs come in, they're devoting a lot of their time to not just filling them once they really have to, but they're looking at them like, uh-oh, is this going to catch anything I accidentally didn't delete or said or CC'd someone in or forwarded to somebody? Full cover-up mode. Terrible way to live. All right, next mention. On or about October 5th, 2021, Morens emailed co-conspirator 1 and 2. Emailed co-conspirator 1 to warn Daszak that, quote, a FOIA picked up an email he had sent to co-conspirator 1 about Fauci. Morens wrote, I deleted that email, but now I learn that every email I ever got or sent since 1998 is captured and will be turned over whether I instantly deleted it or not. Gmail, phone, text, it's all there. I need to scrupulously rely on those exclusively. So he's saying, like, I got it. We can only communicate on these things. Now, October 5th, 2021, Morens learns how computers work. This guy, there's something that happens, I swear, when really, really bad people, when really bad criminals, regardless of what their actual IQ is, they become dumb once they start committing crimes. Like, how could you be so dumb to not understand that things such as this are recoverable, whether you deleted them or not? Okay, next mention. I'm glad he is. I'm glad he's that dumb as regards to those things. I'm glad Bob Goldbar Menendez was dumb about the things he was dumb about. All right, the next one is, there we go. David's this is in my thread. David's NIH email address was voided, and they're pulling out emails to me or Fauci about Wuhan. You're in some of these. And further up in this paragraph right here on there, co-conspirator or Daszak, he grabbed 27 emails that he had in his inbox or folder or whatever, and said, I think some of these might be what that FOIA just caught. In these 27 emails, here are all the things that they could see, which is what I read to you in that paragraph about stuff slipping through and the embedded confession, all of that. That's that tranche, or this is in DC, so I should use the word tranche. In DC, tranche is what you use when a bunch of important documents are discovered or released. It's a very fancy word. I wonder if Rush Limbaugh ever did a segment on the word tranche and how the media uses it. I don't recall it. I'll never forget gravitas, but I do wonder if he ever did anything with the word tranche. I'm trying to find, this one didn't pick it up. There's another mention here of Fauci, and I'm trying to find it, but I'm not seeing it. And I don't know why it's not showing it to me. There's another mention here where he said it grabbed these. There's another mention I have on my on my text document search, where it says on or about October 20. I must have missed it. There it is. There it is, right there. On or about October 27, 2021, Morens emailed Kush stating that, quote, "It is probably safe for you to contact me on Gmail, but if there's anything sensitive about Fauci, so anything sensitive or about Fauci, it's best to use the phone." Not the most important thing, but that was just the next mention. Okay. And then this is W right here, paragraph W, between or on or about September 15th, 2022, and on or about September 18th, 2022, Morens and the other co-conspirators and others, it says, participated in an email exchange regarding FOIA request and pre-disclosure notification contact. Daszak anticipated headlines that might come from the public disclosure of the emails, such as, quote, "Leading scientists conspire to undermine investigation into lab leak theory via back channel to Fauci. An embedded confession if I ever seen one." That is an embedded confession. And I think that's one of the most damning things in these emails, at least that we've seen so far, is all of the embedded confessions in them. These guys know exactly what they're doing. I mean, they don't know how computers work, but they know that they are circumventing the federal government and the American public, and they're doing so in order to control narratives, get grants reinstated, get money. It's greed. I don't know if politics, I don't know if the election comes up in any other emails. That's not included on the court document yet. So I don't know if they talk about how the way they're handling COVID could influence the 2020 election. If that comes up in their little conspiracy, could be it. If it does, I think you can get a conspiracy against rights charge against them or election interference. But what does come across very plainly is that these guys were trying to get tax money into their pockets and cover up what EcoHealth had been involved in. And by extension, what NIH had been involved in, even though NIH had banned it. And the people at NIH are very eager to hear anything that would take the heat off of them. So they're influencing them. I don't think it was that hard. All right, next one is just to mention the title, which is the use of his Gmail account. Morens and the others use Gmail to create, exchange, and conceal federal records, including to pass non-public NIH information and to back channel information to Fauci as set forth below. Then it gives some examples of that. So the next mention is down here. On or about January 21st, 2021, Daszak emailed Morens and others telling Morens to, quote, "Please ask Fauci to ask the Secretary of State," which at that time would be Mike Pompeo, "to send me an email with the information in it, and I'll share it." No, wait, that's January 21st, 2021. So that's going to be after Pompeo's gone. So that's after this is the day after Joe Biden becomes president. Daszak is immediately on Moren saying, "Hey, get the new Secretary of State to send me an email with the information in it, and I'll share it with the WHO team." Daszak asked Morens to please get the message to Fauci that the only way to really understand the risk of these viruses and protect the planet against the next COVID has to be working with our China counterparts. If you don't know or don't recall, Daszak is very much a compromised individual, compromised by CCP. He still lives in China. He moved to China and is paid buku money to still do virus research there. Maybe if he ever visits the U.S. or a country with a good extradition treaty, there will be a red notice, and he'll be taken into custody, like the Tate brothers have been. Okay. Next one is a good idea. On or about February 21st, 2021, Daszak emailed Moren stating it was, quote, a very good idea regarding briefing Fauci, and that he would offer to brief Fauci and the NIAID senior staff before briefing the NIAID COVID group. Man, can you imagine how difficult it is to say that acronym at a cocktail party in DC? NIAID. All right. This is Daszak in February 2021 wanting to himself brief Fauci. He's practically a CCP agent. The other thing, remember, China's in cover-up mode as well. I wonder if one day we'll learn that Daszak was, in his effort to do these things, Daszak was getting, I'm sure he was getting talking points from CCP on what to give to Morens and then Morens to Fauci, and Dajak's like, I'll do it myself. Influence ops inside influence ops, right? All right, next mention has to do with a Nobel laureate, who I'm not sure who that is. And I didn't really look anyway. On or about March 10th, 2021, co-conspirator one introduced, that's Daszak, introduced a Nobel laureate to Morens over email stating, quote, introducing you to David Morens, who works directly for Fauci. Daszak wrote that the Nobel laureate was, quote, speaking out about the abuse of the funding system for political gain. How? I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what to say. And that the Nobel laureate wanted to reach out to Fauci by email, but obviously that's difficult these days. And that he was hoping Morens would make sure an email from the Nobel laureate to Fauci would be read. Daszak concluded the email by stating, I will now exit the conversation because of my clear conflict of interest, which is another embedded confession of sorts, because he's confessing he knows that engaging with Fauci via his senior advisor so that he can get money into his company is underhanded. It's a conflict of interest. And he's seeking to get more money, either a grant renewed or a new grant. And he's going by it through non-public, non-foyable means. He's lobbying without there being a record of it, aside from this private email communications. All right. On our next mention, I was about to read a different paragraph. Okay. Next mention is March 29th at 2021. Then the image, right, there we go. On or about April 21st, 2021. So this is a year after the grant was canceled. The Bat Coronavirus Grant to EcoHealth was canceled. Morens and Daszak, with copies to others, exchanged emails regarding a Zoom meeting with Fauci that they were going to have the next day. In the body of the email, Morens describes various topics relating to the Zoom meeting, including what info or documents Daszak would or would not want Morens to share, and issues Fauci would be concerned about, including, quote, the possibility that NIH-funded scientists or other esteemed scientists are in cahoots with politicians wanting to attack him or NIAID. Morens added that it might be best to connect you two in an off-the-record manner because we, I thought it was abbreviation for whatever, because we are getting FOIA'd nonstop. So it's most important that Fauci not have anything on the record that could come back to bite. Another damning email and quote. And what kind of thing are they worried about coming back and biting Fauci? Well, how about Daszak and EcoHealth subverting the Federal Records Act and FOIA in order to communicate with Fauci about a pandemic that they had a hand, at least possibly, plausibly, most likely, had some hand, some role in. Next one. That one's a highlight right there. If Fauci was if he was actually answering the questions on Capitol Hill today, this is one of the things I would love for him to be asked about. Did you ever join a Zoom meeting with David Morens and Peter Daszak? In that meeting, were you what were the subjects discussed in that meeting? Do you recall Daszak giving you any talking points? Like I would just love to pick this apart right here. And I also think that this is something that if, through this court case, we might learn more. This indictment doesn't have everything, of course, that DOJ has on Moren. So this is a taste of the kind of things they have. I wonder what kind of stuff they left off. All right, next mention is the next paragraph. We are on mention 30 of 35, by the way. On or about April 21st, same day. Wait, no, I'm reading the same paragraph twice. No, I'm not. No, it's next. Okay. That same day, they emailed about the Zoom meeting some more. And Daszak told Morens, quote, please feel free to share any docs that I've sent to you with Fauci. Hopefully you can do that in a way that avoids FOIA. And if not possible, show him stuff on the screen share on Zoom. Daszak attached a document titled Political Actions Regarding EcoHealth's Work on Coronavirus. So politics is creeping in right here. This admission here, where he says it's in bold in the indictment. I want to highlight it, but it's going to highlight the whole paper. Oh, good. It did just some of it. All right. Hopefully you can do that in a way that avoids FOIA. Okay. This is awareness that what you are doing is criminal. This is forethought in avoiding the requirements under the Federal Records Act and FOIA legislation. This is mens rea right here. State of mind. The state of mind of this group is we need to influence Fauci in a way that is not discoverable by FOIA, which is what he's been indicted for. Okay, next one is October 24th, 2021. On or about October 24th, 2021, Daszak emailed Morens and Kush and the company and EcoHealth Chief of Staff with the subject line, draft response to NIH Deputy Director for Extramural Research. Please review. Daszak wrote that he was, quote, trying to rapidly respond to the NIH Deputy Director's letter, as well as to the NIH Principal Deputy Director's public statement that EcoHealth failed to comply with reporting restrictions in connection with the BAT coronavirus grant. So they're in trouble again. Daszak attached several documents, including a letter titled Response to the Deputy Director. Daszak finished the email by stating, David, I'll send some bullets for you to pass on to Fauci later on. By this point in their conspiracy, this is routine. Morens is captured. I think Morens is captured in a way by CCP agent, in a way, Peter Daszak. Next mention. Go way down. And there. Morens used his role as senior advisor to Fauci to engage in official acts favorable to Daszak and EcoHealth. This is the charge right here. This is the charge. And they concealed it. And in the agreement, the reason that Morens agreed to this, or at least one of them, was that he was going to get illegal gratuities for doing this. He was going to get payback. He was going to get kickbacks, as he called it in one email. And this is the final mention of Fauci in the indictment. And some of the stuff that is included in these kickbacks that he gets is super expensive wine and rare wines, expensive dinners, and I don't know what else. Not all of the kickbacks he got have been disclosed yet in the case. I want to touch back on, and I want to, well, I'll just do it right here on this screen. Right here, let's see. Where'd it go? Here we go. David, I'll send some bullets for you to pass on to Fauci later on. So, something to keep in mind here with this group, as I mentioned about Daszak being captured by the CCP, possibly, and then now essentially capturing Morens and then capturing Fauci through Morens. And again, this is not a defense of Fauci, but there's an influence op within an influence op here. There's no way that Daszak has the relationship with the CCP that he does, and he's not functioning as an apparatchik of them. There's he's in effect, he's an agent of the CCP. He's very much one. I don't think that's far-fetched to state at all. He's very much an agent of the CCP by consequence of him having the relationship with them that he does. And the CCP is in damage control mode, unlike any other country in the world at this time in 2020 and 2021, because they have taken such a huge hit from the coronavirus pandemic. And they are trying to save face, which is extremely important to them. They are trying to shut down any sort of notion, any narrative that they had something to do with the pandemic beginning. And I think that's where, if you think back to all the different conspiracy theories about the origins of COVID, a lot of them can be sourced, I think, to the CCP and to bots run by the CCP to try and promote various theories, such as it came from Ukraine, it came from U.S. government in their military exercise, which the name just flew out of my head. It came from North Carolina, it came from Boston, like all of these things, anything to pollute the discussion about the source of it, because they needed to take the heat off of them. And one of their primary functionaries for doing that, Daszak. And Daszak is doing it through Morens, and Morens is passing that on to Fauci. And so, not that again, not defending him, but one of the things that I can't help but I can't keep out of my mind completely when we see this 2-minute hate of Fauci is that he's got his own failings that he deserves to be held to account for. But there's a whole just nest of, let's say, ne'er-do-wells. This is as much as we're targeting him with a 2-minute hate today, he was targeted for a different type of operation by China. All right. Wrapping it up, I don't know where this case is going to go. It's very curious to me that there's been so little happening with it. I mean, there's sealed stuff at the beginning of it. There's more sealed filings in May, and then uh, there was some modifying of his conditions of release in May. And then there's been this motion for Erica Johnson to appear, and there's not much happening here. I wonder, I just had this thought. I wonder if any of David Moren's attorneys are also representing Fauci. This is Ice Miller LLP. I wonder if any of them also represent Fauci in this hearing today. I don't know. I don't know. All right. That's our update on the Morens case, and then also our review of Fauci's mentions in this. It'll be really interesting if they're able to subpoena Fauci as a witness in this trial. That'd be fun. All right, we'll see what happens. I'll see you in the next video. All right. Thanks for listening to me go over those court cases and give my opinions and ramblings and musings about stuff. Appreciate you guys. Again, my link tree is in the usual places where you can find all the ways to follow me, watch me, and support what I do. Thank you to everybody who supports. I will see you all on the next one. Oh, like, subscribe, comment. It really helps videos on Rumble and YouTube, but especially YouTube. If you like and comment, it helps so much. There's definitely a wall on YouTube that you have to break through in order to get recommended to people, to get noticed on YouTube. And it's people commenting that more than anything else helps that happen. So even if you just comment good vid, or if you comment something about it, just share your opinion. I mean, disagree with me, whatever it is, it helps me. So thank you to everybody who comments. And yeah, I'll see you next one, guys. Remember, we're all just human. Have a good one.